Okay, I'm going to start with a little quote. Really, the topic that a few things coincided for me that made me want to talk about this. Machon Alizai has just published Reb Mordechai Banet's Chuvas, Volume 2. Reb Mordechai Banet is a Hungarian Rav, Oberlandische Rav, very close with Chasam Sefer, etc. And in there, in the back of Chelik Beis that they just published, there's a Chuva about Fashtapte Gens, which is force-fed geese, which is Fagra, which Grad I think is a topic we should talk about at some point. I think it's a Gishmaka Machlekes, a lot of different customs. It's a fancy food. We should probably revisit it. But in there, the tshuva is about an edict that the Bnei Yissaschar made. The Bnei Yissaschar was the Rav of Diniv. He's the great grandfather of Munkach and Diniv and many other Rebbes. He made an edict in the town of Diniv, which is in Poland, I believe. I could be wrong, but I think Poland. Where he said that they should not eat any of these geese that are stuffed. You don't eat the livers of the geese, no fagra. And the shoyel is writing to Ramat Chabanat to ask him, does he have to listen to this edict? Is this edict appropriate? Is this halachically, whatever? And the tshuva is a very short tshuva. And what caught my eyes, it's funny, the Maram Banet, who clearly does not know much about Hasidim or Diniv in particular, he tells him that it's an alta nidin in the Poskim, there's makam to be machmer, and you shouldn't think just because it's a Chassidish Rebbe that made the rule that he doesn't know what he's talking about. That's the truth. He says you shouldn't think that just because it's a Rebbe he doesn't know what he's talking about. There are plenty of Rebbes who know how to learn. It's like a short. What's funny is because the Rambam, he's not being sarcastic, he's not being funny. He's really just writing kafi what he knows. Like he's not super involved in that world, and he's just it's early. This is a tshuva like in the probably in the early 1800s or maybe even late 1700s, and see this is still relatively new. Hasn't really spread to Austro-Hungary yet very much. Some of the earliest rabbis is like Isaac Kalaver, the Yisrach Moshe. These are a little bit later and really hasn't made it to his vicinity. He's just writing like what he thinks. Now, it sparked like a machshav, a little thought in my mind. I wanted to talk about which early rabbis were famed for their Talmudic erudition. And Bechlal lav iyat Shemei hein, Bechlal hein iyat Shemei lav. I'm not saying that anyone who's not in this list wasn't. I'm just it's call it a stream of consciousness of different rabbis who were famed and what they were famous for, and I think it can make for an interesting conversation. I want to open with a paragraph that Rabbi Zevin wrote in his La'ar HaHalacha. He has an essay about.
Is it a paragraph or a disclaimer?
This is a paragraph. He starts off like this. Now he's a Lubavitcher Chassid, Reb Shlomo Yosef Zevin, Lubavitcher Chassid, a genius. He was the editor of the Encyclopedia Talmudis, like the original editions. Encyclopedia Talmudis is still not finished. This was his project that he started like in the 50s, in the 1950s, I think. He's a big genius. He was close with many Gedolei Yisrael.
Oh, that wasn't just missing half the sentence?
No, they're working on it. It's in the middle, yes. He writes a paragraph like this. Margele b'pumi de inchi. There's a thing that people like to say. Ki achsidim v'rabbeiseyim einam achshivim m'sahamaka b'tera aniglas v'einam oiskim harbe b'talmud b'poiskim. The Welt sagt, he says, that Chassidim and their Rebbes are not too oisik in Teres Anigla, and they're not too bothered with what it says in the Talmud and the Poiskim. Oid mi reishis hiskalas Teres Chassidus since the beginning, mamish since the dawn of the Chassidim. That's what I mean. Yeah. So one second, the article obviously is going to be to prove this isn't true. Yeah, 1 second. That's the point of, hang on. So he says, Oid mi reishis hiskalas Teres Chassidus, from the beginning, from the first dawn of Chassidus, Hoitzi Lazal Tzadikim, people were mighty, rumors about the Tzadikim, Avoisa Chassidus, the founders of Chassidus, its leaders and its shining lights, She'enem Gedolim B'Torah, V'She'em Mevatlim Mevatchin Esleim De'Torah, that they're not big Talmidei Chachamim and that they're mezazel in Talmidei Chachamim. V'yesh Amru Aleim She'enem B'Chlal B'Geder Talmidei Chachamim. Those who said they're not even Talmidei Chachamim B'Chlal. V'Ad Yom Hazeh Nishtar She'ben Kama V'Kama She'enem Me'adas Chassidus Hadeya She'roish Teres Chassidus Habesh L'Hoya Ben Torah. Chas v'Shalom. He says this is for dramatic effect. He says this is something that still today many people who are not Hasidish believe that Baal Shem Tov wasn't a Ben Torah b'chlal. Ve'hecharu hachziku v'dei psula zu kam me'asayfrim hamis yamrim liyos chayker Chasidus. And many of the primary authors and scholars of Chasidus believe this. It says psula hi yadei, it's possible. Mneshereishis kol hi kezeves. First of all, it's not true. Built in chayin, it's inaccurate. I don't know what this word is. It's for bad reasons. And then he's going to continue on and bring many examples of Grace Rebbes with Talmidei Chachamim, and I want to liberally sample from his selection and be meisif and add on as we go along. But really, I wanted to open with a different tshuva that's a fascinating tshuva. One of the most famous early Rebbes, still today is a famous Rebbe, which is a big chiddush, is Menachem Mendel of Rimanov. You had his kever. Many people have been to his kever. There's a beautiful haif at his kever already, a shul with a dorm and food, and it's beautifully well appointed, which is a chiddush because he's a Polish Rebbe, not a Hungarian Rebbe. And it's a bigger chiddush because he does not have, there's no current existing Rimmen of a Chassidim. There's no Rimmen of a Rebbe now. Maybe there is. It's some shtibel in Tel Aviv somewhere. Like there's no big powerful Rimmen of a Chassidus today. So and not only that, it's gone for a very long time. The Rimmen of a Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Rimmenov, who died in like the early 1800s, did not leave over a successor from his family. The one who took him over was his Talmud of Tzvi Hersh Mesharis, who became Rav Hershel Rimmenover. After him, maybe one of his children, but I don't even know. I don't even know. Like he didn't leave over a dynasty Bechayav. His Svarim, he didn't write any Svarim. His Svarim were published by the Mari Cheskel, Rav Cheskel. What was his name? Mari Cheskel. His name escapes me this second. Paneth, Rav Cheskel Paneth. It's a very prominent Chassidish family. Later on, his family became Dej, exactly the Paneths, but Rav Chatzkel Roth, Carlsberg Rav in Borough Park, was a Einikel. The Mari Cheskel himself, Rav Cheskel Paneth, who was not a Rebbe yet, was a Rav in Carlsberg. It was actually the entire that Rebelski had to officiate on, about two Einiklach of the Mari Cheskel who wanted the name Carlsberg. Rav Chatzkel Roth won that entire. But meaning he was the one who wrote the Svarim of the Menachem and the Rimmenov and the Menachem Tzion and Menachem Meshiv. He was like the Kaisiv of Mendel Rimmenov. So it's a big chiddush that Mendel Rimmenov is still such a prominent name that people go down by. Partially it has to do with two schools that are attached to his name. Both have to do with Parnasa. Mendel Rimmenov was very consumed with Yidden having Parnasa. He was a big believer in Jews being wealthy. And I think because of that, Jews repaid him that they still go visit his grave 200 years later, even though it's not like, it doesn't really fit into the normal cross-section of which Rebbe should be like, have a long, but he was very busy with Yidden having Parnasa. For 22 years, he darshaned on the Parshas Haman. He gave Shabbos Torah on the Parshas Haman for 22 years straight. He was very phenomenal with it, which is why today there's a school, the Welt says that if you say Parshas Haman on Tuesday, Parshas B'Shalach, Shai Meger Chatargim, it's a school from Mendel Rimmenov, Parnasa. L'maisa, more than likely, Mendel Rimmenov did not even know of that school's existence. It was probably invented later, and you know what? That's another topic we should get to and cover later. The idea that Parshas Haman is a school of Parnasa is brought down in the Yerushalmi already. The Torah brings it down, but it's nothing to do with saying it on Yom Gimel Parshas B'Shalach. It's saying it every day. Something for every day. And there's another school that's attached to his name. Is that they say? What do you say? Yeah, same shir with Kamanis, exactly. But they say if you light candles with 40 days in a row, you get whatever it is that you need. Like so, because of these two schools, I think he has remained very much like in focus. Shia. Mendel Rimmenov was one of the early rabbis. He's a Talmud of the Mezritcher Magid. He was born. He's a Yeki, not a Litvak, a Yeki. He was born in Germany to Chashiv, a German rabbinic family. At 18 years old, he went to learn by the Magid in Mezritch. He became a Chassid, and he stayed there for life. Later on, he became a Rebbe in Poland at the same time as the Chayz of Lublin. Others. He has many famous Talmidim of his. He was, a very important Rebbe. Now, there's a tshuva that the Mari Ches. Now, his Talmud I mentioned there was the Mari Ches, Rav Cheskel Paneth. Rav Cheskel Paneth also was born in a Litvish family, which was common in those days, in the early days of Chassidus, that someone could be born to a Litvish family and become a Chassid. Adarabba, everyone had to start somewhere. So, right, they were either a Yaki or a Litvak or a Polish, and then they became a Chassid. They had to come from somewhere. But Rav Cheskel Paneth, who was also, I think, came from a Yakish family, went to learn by the Mezritcher, by the Rimmenov, as a young man, as a fresh young man. He left his wife and he would go for a few months at a time. Now, his father, it seems, at least based on this tshuva, it's a recreation of his family circumstances. His father, it seems, was not terribly bothered by the fact that his son became a chassid. He was perturbed. He didn't know Gnoi what it meant to be a chassid, like what is it to become a chassid, but he wasn't like bent out of shape. There wasn't Talmud Chacham in town where they came from who was much more bent out of shape, who said like, this is terrible, you lost your son. Rav Cheskel Paneth was Edul Gduli, he was a good head. Later on, the Mari Cheskel goes on to write impressive Shuvas, impressive Svarim. He was a good head, and you're losing him to the Chassidim, and like it's terrible. He's going to become an Amaritz. He's not going to learn. He's going to hang out in Rimmenov. God knows what they do in Rimmenov. It certainly ain't Torah. This is what the other person in the town told the father. Now, this person, together with the Mari Cheskel's father, wrote him a letter, like demanding receipts. And basically, they said, "We're going to ask you a bomb kash on a sugya. Take it to your Rebbe, the Rimmenov, and if he has something to say on the topic, then good. If he doesn't have some Torah to say on the topic, then you're in the wrong place, and come back home and learn like a mensch." This is the tshuva that they sent him, amongst many other, I'm sure, tainis, but this is the letter that they sent him. Now, personally, I think it's never fair to ask someone on whatever sugya you happen to be in the middle of, what do you have to say in this? And if he can't produce, he's not a Talmid Chacham. I mean, everybody's got. I'm saying like very few people could you talk to them on the full length and breadth of Kol Torah Kul and expect them to have something. But this is the letter that it says. So now I want to read you like little samplings. It's a very important sampling in A, that the Rebbe was a big Talmid Chacham, and B, in the whole Chassidish attitude towards this whole request. It's an interesting tshuva, somewhat combative in certain parts. He says, "B'boy lebesi," he says, "Shavua Avar." I got home from Pristik, where I think the Rebbe was at that time. I was schwach and tired from the trip. I didn't have a chance to look at your letter, but now I looked at your letter. V'gemarti b'daiti l'sakev. Fine, I looked at your letter that you wrote to me together with the other person in the town. Hesiani hakatzin Reb Gumpel mipoi. I'm going to write you back a letter. He says, this is the misnagid in the town. In this letter, Tata, that you wrote to me, you wrote over there from Reb Shlomo Pilz, who's the big misnagid. And he was a little harsh about Rabbeinu Agadol, or Mendel Rimanover. He said, send me some chidushim that I heard from his mouth. And I should also ask your mental to answer these questions that I have. But the deal was, if Shlomo Pilt said, if you prove to me that Mendel Rumen is Talmid Chacham, I'll become the cheerleader. I'll go and tell everybody that Mendel Rumen is Talmid Chacham. He says, if I didn't know you from beforehand, and I knew that you're a Talmid Chacham and you're a Shemayim, I would ignore this request. Send it straight to spam. You don't begin to understand what it means to be a Rebbe. You're an outsider. You don't know what it means to be a chassid, to be a Rebbe. You're an outsider. You don't know what it is, what these Rebbes are, what these chassidim that we're attracted to are. And how deep and powerful their influence is. And what it means to sit in the Rebbe's inner circle and be involved in them. But since I know who you are, and I know that you're a good guy, and you're just you're misguided, I'll answer to you what's going on. It says Reishis Dvar Shal Shal L'Shleich L'Chidush Torah Shiruach Hashem Dibur B'Rabbeinu. You asked me to send you Shtikol Torah. He says. Fine. He says Anochi Leikein Edma. I don't need you to become his cheerleader. I don't care if you like him or not. I don't have to convince you that he's good. You think Reb Mendel Rimanov cares if you think he's heilig or not heilig? Who cares? He's just focused on serving Kadosh Baruch Hu, bringing Jews closer to Hashem. He doesn't care if you agree with him, you like him, you don't like him. I don't see the tachlis b'chlal of engaging with your request. Then he continues on. He writes a little bit about the Sudas were like and how long he was there for, and which other famed Talmidei Chachamim that you would know of dreizich there. Like he gives a whole list of other Talmidei Chachamim who dreizich there, meaning like, and these people are not Amaratzim, and if they dreizich there, Muslim saying that he's not, he's not an Amaretz. He brings which Gvirim dreizich there, meaning who like the important people that you would know. He says, "V'anochi shefines." I wrote down different zachen, kifimiyat hasagasi, how I understand it, and I'm going to tell you over a little bit. And then he goes on. He says, one second. When you'll be zeicha, tisku l'shmaya divrei lekim chayim l'marei necham yitzim pekadosh. Maybe you'll be zeicha to come hear Torah from him on your own. Az tavinu yiras Hashem v'das drachai raglei chasidais l'bilti l'shuvlet l'kisla. And maybe if you come here and you actually sit by him a little, you'll begin to understand, who he is and what we're dealing with over here. Then eventually, after telling him that he does not need to justify him, and that he doesn't need to be a conventional Talmid Chacham and fit into your box, and you don't understand what a tzaddik is and how heilig he is and how special he is and how connected he is, then he goes on and he brings some Torah from him. He says, you told me he should answer your questions. You made me laugh, he says. Here's the real Chassidus. He says, because he can answer, it's a good shtickle Torah, that makes him heilig. Well, what does that have to do with being heilig? You can tell me like he's heilig, his answer kasha. Your silly kasha matters to heilig yid like this? For Amru Chachamim, davar gadol ma'aser merkava, davar katan havayis tabai v'rava. Davar gadol is ma'aser merkava. It's kedusha, shchina, heilig. Davar katan is avayis dabai v'rava. Now, this letter is rather like a double-edged sword because he kind of machsavek what Litvak's care about, right? The Litvak who's writing to him would probably be horror-struck by this. It's like I'm asking you about learning, and you tell me learning is not that important. Relax, it's just learning. That's what he says. So he gives and takes in the tshuva, and then he continues on. One of the little shamashim in the court could answer your kashas about nigla. The Rebbes not for your little your kashan bavakama. That's what the Rebbes for. Rebbes for grace zachin. The kashan bavakama you'll ask a mutz who's hanging out in the Rebbes chatzar. That's what he writes to him. Fine, and then eventually he goes off and he actually gives him some Torah, and he tells him that if you don't understand it, it's your problem. And the truth is a long truth, and I can't read the whole truth, but the truth is that Rebbe Larunov's yard site is Lamed Daled Ba'omer. It just was actually on Lag Ba'omer. He said that I'm getting ready to go, and he's ready to go. And Lad Ba'omer is when he was nifter. And Rav Chaim Tzanze, the Tzanze Rav, would be makbid to learn this tshuva on the yard site of Rebbe Larunovich. He held this was like Ikra Das. Like this is like you say this like a tshuva, and like a real definitive tshuva in what it means to be a chassid and a rebbe and whatever. Now he ends off, Kasafti Zayis Rak Lahoitzi Atayis Milivchem, the Torah that I wrote to you is just to be Moitzi the Torah Milivchem, the Ulam B'Rabbeinu Nira, Tavayis Buhu, Hitaka has both. Meaning I wrote to you that it's not important, but Hitaka has both. And the truth is the Rimonov always mans us to learn Torah B'Iyun and to learn Torah Lishma. This is the line that I wanted to get to. The Rimonov always tells us that all the tzaddikim, it's a little bit of Vifuchav. He says the Rimonov always tells us all the tzaddikim only got the madrega that they got to because they learned Torah B'Iyun. They learn Iyun for real. And he brings the learning shua. So this is just a...
He answers questions?
He does answer, yeah.
He answered it, or he asked...
No, he brings over a Torah that he heard from the Rebbe on that sugya. And the tshuva, it's a long tshuva. It's like a 15-page tshuva. But in it, so I'm just saying, he writes, first of all, that don't tell me about Torah, that's not the kaveh. And then he actually says, from the Rimonov, there's an early Rebbe that Lamaisa, the Rimonov used to say, that the only, thing that really makes people important is how good they are in learning. So I just thought that's a proper hakdama to Reb Zevin's piece. Reb Zevin does not bring this tshuva in there, as far as I know. I didn't look through it perfectly, but then he goes through it. And we'll sample a few of the Rebbes that he goes through. He says, Reish v'Rishon. The first one, he says, Ir v'Kodesh Mishmai Nachz v'Shal Baal Shem Tov. The first Rebbe is the best, founder of Chassidus. Me'elav Muchan she'en lechiach klum me'ov d'shal nisharach of Chidush HaTorah b'Ksav Yad b'Tfos. Now the main taina that everyone who likes the Mak says, Baal Shem Tov didn't live with any svarim. There's not a single sefer from the Baal Shem Tov's Kisvei Yadis. So he says, okay, big deal. Harigami teres hanistel inisha b'ksav yadei klum. Even from the Chassidish Zachan. I mean, you're telling me we don't have his Chidushim Babakama. I don't have his Chaburas on the Sugis of Muktzah. So Vice says, we also don't have anything from him in Nister B'chal, inisha b'ksav yadei klum.
The only thing we do have are the stories.
So Kol Ma Sheyesh B'Shmoi B'Teres Chassidus Talmidim Im Shekasu. Only thing we have is what Talmidim wrote down. Talmidim Kamuvan Le'Nasal B'Shem B'Shal Shmoi V'Nechdush B'Shas and Paiskim. Talmidim didn't go to hear Shlikal Torah on Baba Kama. They went to hear Chassidish Zachan, Kabbalistic Zachan. So that's all we have written over. It's not a taina that there's nothing written over. Now, and then he says, and you want to know that the proof that this is true, because who are the Talmidim who went to go? And he starts listing the Talmidim who went to go. These were not a Maratzim. They wouldn't be going if he was Stam played during Shtosim. He says he starts with Pinchas of Karetz, who we know is a Talmud Chacham. Then he says the Rebbe Reb Shmelka of Nikolsburg and his brother Reb the Hafla. Well, no, the Reb Shmelka and his brother the Hafla of Pinchas Alevi. Reb Pinchas Alevi and Reb Shmelka Alevi are two brothers. They went to they're both Talmidei Chachamim, both classically Talmudically educated in the regular Litvish system. There's even a rumor that says that they dreizach by the Gaon a little bit before they went to the Baal Shem Tov. Big Talmidei Chachamim, both of them occupied big Rabbanison in Germany. Yekish jobs. One became a Rav in Nikolsburg, one became a Rav in Frankfurt. They got big jobs. The Talmidei Chachamim, the Hafla wrote many svarim on various different chalakim of Shas. Rav Shmelka didn't, but again, he was a big Rav. These are big Talmidei Chachamim, big Rabbanim. If they went to learn by the Baal Shem Tov, obviously they were going to hear Grace Zachan. How could you doubt that he was Talmid Chacham? Now the truth is that there are very, very few psakim, halacha l'maisa psakim, brought down b'shem Baal Shem Tov. Very, very few. There is an interesting psak that almost everybody in this room has been saimach on in their lifetime, that more than likely comes from the Baal Shem Tov, and that is to eat turkey. Turkey is a bird that does not have a Mesorah. I've given a shit about this in the past. Turkey does not have a Mesorah. Turkey is an American bird. It's not a European bird. It came to Europe only after the pilgrims came. Once ships started coming back and forth, so Turkey started bringing back. The halacha generally is that by birds, by oifas or makbad on a Mesorah, you don't eat a bird without a Mesorah, even if it has the simanei kashrus. The whole sugi for itself, the Gemara Chulin says there's 4 simanim. The Maisa, we only eat it with a Mesorah, that's the halacha. there's even some poskim that hold everything needs Masera. We don't need even other types of kosher without a Masera. That's a different shayla. But birds, zichar the din is we only eat with a Masera. And turkey was a new bird. Where's the Masera to eat it? So some people said it's really an error that the Jews in India, it's called a Tanagol Haidu. They called it a Indian Tanagol Haidu is what it's called in Hebrew. For some reason they believe that it all goes back to the original mistake that they thought that when they went to the United States that they were hitting the other side of the world. Right? When they thought they hit America, they thought they hit India, which is the other side of the Asian continent. Right? They thought they found the shortcut to Asia. Really, they made to America, so it was called, as a misnomer, it was called like the Tanagol Hodu, the Indian chicken.
Or the Indian people live there.
No, but they didn't know. They were only called Indians because of this. I don't even know how this happened, but so some say that the Jews in India ate it. Now it's a tayus because there were zichar no Jews living with the Native Americans in the United States in the 15 and 1600s. It's a tayus, but you say that it's not true. So it's brought down in Svarim. I'm saying whatever. It's been said. But the Darkei Tshuva, who's the Munkach Rebbe, in his siman on Oif Nechel B'Maseira, he brings that it was a groise shayla to eat turkey or not to eat turkey. And there are families that are makbid not to, and there are Rabbanim, Ahi, and Aheretz, everything. Ad sheba Rivash, until Rivash came, and he was matir it. Now, there were people who came to this Darkei Tshuva, and they said, I don't understand. The Rivash is Yivitzak Bar Sheshes. It's a Sephardi Paisik from the 1400s. The Rivash is printed. It's 2 volumes. We look through it. There is no tshuva about Turkey. As a matter of fact, he predates the existence of Turkey in the European milieu. It didn't exist b'chlal. But Rivash is really an acronym for Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. Reb Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, who's called that sometimes in Chassidish Sfarim. Actually, the tzava of the Baal Shem Tov is referred to as tzavas harivash. If you could buy one today, still it's called tzavas harivash. So the Darkei Tshuva is quoting a psak, Ad sheba Rivash, until the Baal Shem Tov came and paskin that it's kosher. And Turkey became widely accepted. And l'chayra, each one of us, b'yodim or b'lo yodim, has been saimach on one of the only surviving piskei halacha from the Baal Shem Tov in our daily life. Stam, interesting, putting it aside. Now he moves on, and he goes to various other early Rebbes. He spends a few more pages on the Baal Shem Tov, proving from his Talmidim, who exactly the Talmidim were, which Svarim they wrote. Many of them wrote Svarim on Halacha, Svarim on Masechtas, and you see if they were going to the Baal Shem Tov, obviously they were going to be yearning from him. He wasn't Stam and Amaretz, they wouldn't go to him. Then he continues on and he goes to the Maggid. The Baal Shem Tov's primary Talmud was the Maggid Mizrich. Now the Maggid Mizrich was older than the Baal Shem Tov. Not only was he older than the Baal Shem Tov, according to many traditions, the Maggid Mizrich had smicha from the Pnei Yeshua. He was a regular Talmud Chacham, educated in the regular Talmud Chacham system, had smicha from the Pnei Yeshua, who's a pretty well-known, certified Talmud Chacham by all accounts, and only later on in life, much later in life, meaning he was older than the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov first came on the scene when the Baal Shem Tov was in his 40s, and then the Maggid only joined them when the Baal Shem Tov was in his 60s or 50s, and the Maggid was already in his 60s. You know what I'm saying? The Maggid was a fartige, known, accomplished Talmud Chacham, a Talmud of the Pnei Yeshua, etc. Now, even though the Maggid as well did not leave over any svarim on limud on regular Torah, but there is some different divrei Torah v'etach that I mentioned in the Talmidim svarim on various different sugyas of here. I'll read you. He says, Talmidei shel Abash Malam Mekayim and the Maggid Mimizrich lo yishar achar v'svarim aval goynuse b'Torah yiduim for semes b'sefer beis Rabbi mesuper b'alichasa shel Rabbeinu Abal Tanya Mizrich and more details etc. v'chulu of the Talmidim. These are now, once you get to the Maggid's Talmidim, here's where you have Chassidish Rebbes who start putting out very substantial halachic svarim that stand on their own 2 feet. Meaning the Haflah is probably the first one, but he wasn't really a Rebbe. He was a Chassid. He wasn't a Rebbe. The Haflah was a Chassid of the Mizrich Maggid, but he wasn't a Rebbe on his own, meaning he was a Rav in a Yekish town. He wasn't, they didn't know Chassidim were there. He wasn't a Rebbe B'chlal, and how he got that shtela is itself a whole story. But the Haflah put out many svarim on Halacha, on Shas, whatever. But the Baal Tanya, who's a Talmud, is actually the youngest Talmud of the Mizrich Maggid. Baal Tanya probably went to the Mizrich Maggid in his teens. Baal Tanya is much, much younger than a lot of Talmidim. He went in his teens. Baal Tanya is already put out, a proper Shulchan Aruch Harav. He put out many other svarim, whatever. Those are on Drush, but the Baal Tanya put out Shulchan Aruch Harav, which was at the request of the Mizrich Maggid. The Mizrich Maggid asked him to produce a Shulchan Aruch for the Chassidim, and he looked around the room and he said, "Who's the most capable, most suitable of putting out a Shulchan Aruch?" And he chose the Baal Tanya. So it's like Asher Samchu Yadav of the Maggid Mizrich told the Baal Tanya, "You put out the Shulchan Aruch." Now, once you're in the Lubavitcher line, so many of the Lubavitcher Rebbes were Rebbes who put out famous svarim. The Tzemach Tzedek put out famous Chuvas svarim. Baal Tanya has a few Chuvas. Some of the other Rebbes of Lubavitch didn't put out I shouldn't say didn't, but not as famous their halachic contribution. The last Lubavitcher Rebbe actually was a prolific writer. They're still putting out on all sorts of topics from him. He did write some sort of Haggayos. They have Haggayos, I think, Teres Menachem on Shulchan Aruch. But he was a prolific, writer and disseminator of Torah of all different kinds. The Baal Tanya put out a Siddur, which involved most of the halachas that are relevant to like a Jew's daily life. The Mishnah Berurah, for example, quotes the most often quoted sefer in the Mishnah Berurah is the Derech Chachayim, which is the Nesivus sefer on the Siddur. Meaning a Siddur, like on Seder Tefillah, meaning like a Siddur is where you really cover so many halachas and negay in daily life, and rather this is a whole sugi for itself. There are sometimes steers between the Shulchan Harav and the Shulchan Harav Siddur. You figure out which one takes primacy, etc. Now, moving along down the line over here, so who else does he bring? So he said that he's a Lubavitcher Chassid, I said, so he spends quite a few pages on the Lubavitcher dynasty and the Lubavitcher Rebbes. Now, what time is it? I think we're going to stop here. Suffice to say, there are many, many more. If someone wants to see it, I can send you this article. It's many pages of various Rebbes. There's so many more to get to. To be continued or not, we'll see.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.